Hello guys, my name is Alex and thank you very much for clicking on this video. I really appreciate it. This video I'm going to talk about the Gamemaker Subreddit monthly challenge for May 2017. So for this month, the challenge is about multi-object manipulation. This is an issue that many new GameMaker users come across because it's a very common problem that needs to be solved. And if a new user is not familiar with the different forms of loops, if they're not familiar with with some basic programming techniques, then it can be a challenge to manipulate, change, add, and remove many objects at a time. So that's what these challenges focus on. So let's go ahead and look at the challenges. The first one being I'm asking people to create 10 objects of the same type after some user input. So that basically means, you can't just have 10 objects in your room editor. You can't just drag them in there. I'm asking people to create them, programmatically after their game has started. For the intermediate challenge, I'm asking for people to take those 10 objects and give them some kind of visible trait. This is gonna force people to save, instance IDs and manipulate their local variables somehow. Again, a very common thing that a lot of new users don't do or don't realize that you can do, and how easy it is to do something like that. And as for the advanced challenge, I'm asking people to then selectively manipulate, only some of the objects that you create. Again, this is forcing new users to learn how to, take all the objects and actually check and read some of their local variables to then manipulate only a select few. So let's go ahead and look at the game that I made for this. We'll look at the code after I bring it up. Actually, the game's already running. Let me close it. Let me run it again. All right, here it is. So what I have here is just a blank empty room with a couple buttons at the top. So there are no objects other than these buttons in the room. I'm going to go ahead and click on the first button. All right, I just clicked on the first button and we got a bunch of grass that spawned. So how did that happen? For starters, let's look at the grass sprite that I have. As you can see, it's just a regular square sprite. And in the game, obviously I'm not just creating one and stretching it. What I'm doing is I'm creating several of these grass sprites and placing them at the bottom of the screen. And how I am doing that is by using a for loop. A for loop is one of the basic fundamental looping techniques that you can use in GameMaker. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm iterating between 0 and some number, which is I calculate up here, and I'm creating a grass sprite object along the floor using my I variable as an index that increases as the for loop increases. For loops are definitely very important, and I encourage anybody not familiar with them to read the documentation and understand how they work. They're not that complicated and they're extremely useful. But that's, like I said, one of the forms that you can loop using the for loop. Let's go ahead and go back to the game. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the green button and we get some vines popping up. Now, how are those vines coming into play? Well, let's look at the code. Basically, here I'm using a different kind of loop. I'm using the with loop, which isn't exactly a loop because it can work in multiple ways. But in this instance, I'm using with to iterate through every wall object, every grass object that I have, which is like 20 or 30, however there are many down here. I'm basically going through each instance and I'm calling some code, inside of that object. In this case, I'm generating a random number, and in essence, giving this grass block a 20% chance to have a vine object be created on top of it. And then what I'm doing, as you can notice, some of these vines are tall and some of them are short. What I'm doing is I'm using, again, the width statement, but this time, instead of putting an object name in there, I'm putting a specific object ID, which is saved inside this variable right here, new vine. And that's, like I said, one of the powerful functions or techniques that new users have to learn. And that is when you use the instance create function, it actually returns the ID of the object you just created. In this case, I create a vine object and I immediately save a reference to it inside of this variable called new vine. I then go ahead and run some code within only this specific vine, in which case I'm running a script called grow vine, which just gives it a random height. In this case, a random 3 blocks high or 2 blocks high or 1 block high. So that's the power of the with statement. You can run it and have it run on every object type, or you can run it on a specific instance. In this case, a specific instance of my object vine object. Again, research the with statement in the documentation if you're still a little fuzzy on it, but believe me, it's just as powerful as any of the other traditional looping techniques. So let's go back into the game, and I'm going to click on the middle red button, and that spawned a bunch of slimes. Like I said, I got very literal when I was creating this game. I wasn't expecting to make slimes, but I made slimes. So if I click it again, I'm going to generate another 10 slimes, another 10 slimes. So very similar to my ground code, let's go ahead and look at my make slimes script. It's always important to have scripts with names that make sense. Make slimes is very obvious as to what it does. This time I'm using the while for loop, or the while loop. Again, another form to loop inside of Gamemaker. A while functions different from a for loop in that it's gonna run forever until some condition is met. In this case, I'm going to run all of this code while the value of slime x is smaller than my room width. Now, to start with, slime x is only 16, so clearly it is smaller than my room width, because my room width is like 1200. So this is going to run once, and then it's going to run this code right here, which is adding some value to my slime x. In this case, it's some number that I calculated. It's the width of my slime times 2. So now the second time that this while runs, slime x is going to be a slightly bigger number, but still smaller than room's width. And it's going to run again and run again and run again. And as we can see, it's going to run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times before slime x gets so big that it's bigger than room width, and then it stops. As soon as this statement becomes false, the while loop stops running. And again, just like the for loop, I'm creating an instance of my object slime at certain offsets. And instead of using I as an index like I did in the for loop, I'm just using, again, another variable that I created, in this case, slime x. The logic is fairly simple, right? The number is just getting bigger, and I'm just creating slimes, next to each other at an offset. And I'm also creating them at a random height just so that they fall, in like a little cool animation. No big deal. And again, just like I did with the vines objects, I'm saving the index of my slime when I create it so that I can run some other code on the specific instance of that slime. In this case, I'm running set slime, which gives each slime a different color and a different size, right? So that's the visible trait that I'm giving each slime. Excuse me. I'm giving them a random color and a random size, just like the intermediate challenge says to. Now I'm gonna go ahead and click on this fourth button, and what's gonna do, it's gonna delete half of the slimes. Now, which half? Let's see if you can tell. I'm gonna click it again. I'm gonna click it again, and I'm gonna click it again. Basically what it's doing, it's deleting half of the slimes and it's deleting the smaller half, right? So if I generate a bunch, there's a really small slime, the red slime up here, and there's a really small green slime down there. I know you can't see my mouse right now, but there's a small red slime right there, and if I click the fourth button, it goes away because it's really small. Basically iterating through all the slimes using that with statement, and basically determining an average scale of every slime. So now I have a number. I don't know why I'm talking about this without showing it. Kill slime code is right here. Kill small. Right, so again, I'm using the with loop to go through every slime and get an average size, right? Obviously, I'm going to add the scale of all the slimes and then divide it by the total number of slimes. And then again, I'm going to iterate through all the slimes, and then I'm going to check their scale. And if their scale is smaller than the average, I'm killing it with my kill slime script. Again, I'm using, the with function to just go iterate through all the slimes. Very useful, very basic, extremely powerful. So let's go ahead and generate a couple more slimes, and this time I'm going to click that last blue button, and let's see if you can tell what it's doing. Oh, let's generate some more slimes. I click the button. You can tell what's happening. I'm basically killing all the slimes that don't have a blue hue, or something close to a blue hue. Obviously, some of those pink and purples are still alive, but that's just because I'm very lenient with what I consider blue hue. Gamemaker actually has a really useful function called get color, or color get blue. There's a color get red and green, and it basically just takes a color value, in this case the color value of the slime, and it can just basically get the value of the blue hue in that color. It could be a number between 0 and 255, and if that number is less than 150, just some arbitrary number I chose, again, it kills the slimes. So basically that's killing all the non-blue slimes. Let's go ahead and restart it. Generate some more slimes. We're gonna kill all the non-blue slimes. Boom. Now we're gonna kill all the small slimes. Boom. Again. So now we're left with only big blue slimes. Oh. Big blue slimes. Cool. And finally, so that already fulfills the expert challenge, because I'm selectively manipulating only a certain set. However, I like bombs. Who doesn't like bombs? So if you right click and generate a stupid little bomb thing, and then it explodes. And if I put it actually close to a slime, boom, it destroys all the slimes around the bomb. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense to destroy things that aren't close to the bomb or whatever. So again, we are selectively manipulating only the slimes that are close to the bomb to kill them, because that's how bombs work, obviously. So let's look at our bomb object, and let's look what happens when it blows up. When it blows up, again, using the with statement to iterate through all my slimes, and then I'm calling a very useful function called distance to object. When you use other inside of a with statement, you're referring to the original object that called this script, in this case, the bomb. That's one of the pitfalls you gotta be careful. When you're using a with statement, inside of the with statement, you are in the scope of the object that you're calling. In this case, inside of the slime. If I were to just say distance to object and put ID here or whatever, it would be referring to itself, to the slime. We are in a different context. You have to explicitly state that I'm not looking at myself. I want to look at something else, a different object. And in this case, you basically use other to refer to the bomb. Bomb radius is obviously just some variable that I declared in the creation event. Bomb radius of 60 pixels. And if the distance between the bomb and the slime is less than 60, the bomb dies. Simple as that. And then I destroy the bomb, and that's it. Again, using the with statement to manipulate only a certain set of objects. And that's basically all the challenges. I know I covered quite a bit, but it's honestly not that complicated, and it's extremely powerful and extremely useful. The for loop, the while loop, and the with statement, and the ability to capture and save an instance ID when you create it. That's basically when you always want to capture an object's ID, is when you create it. That's the most obvious and easy way to capture an ID. If you know you wanna, if you ever want to manipulate an instance later on in your game's life cycle, you basically have to capture that ID, and it's best to capture it when you're creating it at runtime. So there it is. Those are the 3 challenges. If anybody has any questions or any comments, feel free to either comment on the subreddit thread or in the video or in the comment section below. I will be happy to answer any questions and to provide some code if you really want to see it. I basically went over all the important bits as to the creation and manipulation of the objects, which is what the challenge is all about. So I look forward to seeing other people's solutions and other people's games and how they go about solving these challenges. It's always fun to see how other people think and how they solve different problems. So I look forward to that. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later.